Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you all are doing good. Do subscribe, like and follow the channel. So in today's lecture, we are going to design a very basic application, the recipe book. In this application, we will have a backend database on WAMP server with which we will connect our application and we will save different recipes there. We will be following the MVC for the development of this particular application. So let's begin. The very first thing that we need to do is create a Java project. So I'm going to file new Java project and I'm going to name this Java project recipe book and finish. So I have my recipe book project right here. So let's first set the environment for our whole project. So because we are following the MVC for our development, so I will be creating three packages: the model package for my database classes, the view package for my interface classes, and the controller package for my logical classes or the business logic classes. So let's create three packages: model, view, controller, right? I'm going to create a source folder as well for the external jars that we will be using, because we will need a jar to connect to our database, the JDBC jar. So for jars right here, so we have our application basic infrastructure. We have three packages: model, view and controller, and we have a jars source folder for our external jars. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have my jar right here. So I have the jar right here, JDBC jar. So I'm going to copy this jar from here and I'm going to paste this jar inside this folder. So I've simply copied the JDBC jar and pasted it here. So I have my JDBC jar in my application right now. I just need to add it to the build path of the application. So right click on the project name and you will see a build path. Go to the configure build path and inside the libraries, go to the add external jars. And inside the required workspace, I have my jar as jdbc.jar. So I have added the jar jdbc.jar and I'm going to say apply and close. So right now this jdbc.jar is in my reference libraries of the application. So the environment of my application is set right now. I have also installed the WAMP server for the database of my application. Let me show you. So I have right here the WAMP server. Right now, I have not created any database for my recipe book or anything because we are going to cover that in our lecture. So right now, this is my WAMP server. Inside databases, I have only these few databases, and this one is database that is generated by me, to-do list. So anyways, let's move ahead. So the very first thing that we need to do is let's design a view for our application. This is the very first thing. So let's go to the view and I'm going to add other a JFrame next, and I'm going to name this JFrame main view. Upon finish, this will generate a certain code for me. So we do not need this. I do not want my main inside the view, so I'm going to delete this particular code. And right now this is my code. So go to the design and right here we have a JFrame with a certain size. So let's set its title. So I say recipe book developed by Shiekh. So upon entering, you can see the title right here. I'm going to resize this frame. So I've resized the frame like this. Okay, I'm going to set the absolute layout to my frame. So I'm going to add a G tab right here and I'm going to resize it to like this. And now I'm going to add a panel right here and set the layout of this panel to absolute. Let's set the name of this panel to add recipe, right? So you go to the design and you will see the add recipe right here. So the very first thing that we need to do, we need to design this panel, and then we will see the execution of how our view actually looks. So go to the design, and now we need to design this panel. So instead of designing this panel here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add another J panel from here next, and I'm going to name this add recipe and finish it. So here I have a panel, and if we go to the design right now, this is the panel. So let's set its boundaries to what I have right here. So this is my panel, and the bounds of this is 664 490. So I will set the bounds of my this add recipe panel to the same. So 664, so somewhere like that, right? 490. So we have a panel with the same bounds as this particular panel bounds. So I'm going to design my application right here. So I say I will have a J label before. So we will design our application right here. But before designing, we will set this panel layout to the absolute. And now I will add a J label right here. I'm going to name this J label as title. Title. Okay, let's set its font, and I'm going to have bold times New Roman, and let's say 22 sides. So once it's done, I'm going to resize this label. Right here we have our title label. Now I need a JText box to actually enable my user to enter something. Let's resize it, and I'm going to add its font styles as well. So I'm going to make it bold and 20 and times New Roman. So the font is set. I'm just going to copy this title and paste it right here, and category. So our recipe will have a title, a certain category. The category could be the on the basis of the dish or on the basis of the country wise. So we will add a combo box right here. I'm going to resize this combo box right here. Okay, go to the model of this combo box and add whatever the categories that you want your recipe book to have. So for example, I want my recipe book to have categories on the basis of the countries. So let's say it may be a Chinese food, or it may be a Thai food, or Italian food, or it may be a Desi food. And I'm going to say okay. So let's change its font as well. I'm going with the same font for all of my text boxes and combos. So 22, and the font style has been set. Now the next two things that our recipe will have are the ingredients and the recipe. So two more labels for ingredients and for recipe. So right now I have my ingredient and my recipe. So for ingredients, I'm going to drop a JText pane or JText area maybe. So I have my JText area right here. I'm going to resize it because my user can have one or many ingredients. So I'm going to have a bigger text area for my user to actually enter the data. So the recipe, and now at the end we will have a simple button for our user to actually uh, perform an action of adding the recipe. So let me just align them right like that. Okay, so let's drag a button and drop it right here, and I'm naming this button save recipe. So the recipe's save button is here, I'm going to place it in the middle. Okay, so we have a recipe. Okay, and let's rename these fields. So this is txt title. This is cb for combo box category. This is txt ingredient. This is txt recipe, and this is btn save recipe. So it's already done. Okay, save. Go to the source and let's see. Okay, I have all the labels and the combo boxes here and everything. The one thing that I'm going to do is, let me, okay, so we can actually see our whole code. So here we have a whole code. So one thing I want to do is, I want to have all of these as my data members of the class. I will let you know the reason later on. So private and like this. I have all of them right here. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to have this panel in my main view right here. So instead of setting this J panel to new panel, I'm going to say J panel is equals to new add recipe panel, right? And I'm going to save it. Let's go to the design and you can see that whole panel here. We cannot edit this panel here, but you can always edit this panel by going into its own class. You can edit it right here and you can see how it looks right here. Now the only thing related to the view that is left is I want to see how actually my view looks like. So I'm going to the controller and I'm going to add a class. I'm naming it main class and I'm saying it will have a main finish. And right here I'm going to generate a view object main view mv is equals to new main view, right? So mv dot set location relative to null. I'm setting the location relative to null so that whenever I start my application, the window will appear right in the middle of the screen. And next, mv dot set visible to true, right? So this will execute my application. Let's see if it actually executes it, and we can see our view. So right here, I have my view. It is giving me title, some categories, some ingredients, and recipe. There is one thing that is wrong in this. So let's see. I want to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I cannot see the further ingredients. And similarly, it goes for the recipe as well, right? So we need to correct this problem. So how we are going to correct this? We are going to add a scroll bar to them. This is my ingredients. So first of all, let's set their fonts as well. So this will be Times New Roman with bold and 22, and this will be Times New Roman bold and 22 as well. Okay, so the fonts are set. Now we need to add the scroll bars. Let's go to the source, and in the text area right here I'm going to say J scroll pane scroll 1 is equals to new J scroll pane, and the component is the text area, the txt recipe. So the next thing that I'm going to do is set the bounds of this scroll to this text area, same as this text area, like this 210 to 43 into 96. So I'm going to say scroll 1 dot set bounds as 210, 43, 96, and 168. Once the bounds have been added, I'm going to add this. So it says scroll 1 dot set vertical scroll bar policy to the scroll pane constants vertical scroll bar, right? So let's just import the javex.string of scroll pane constants. So once it's done, Everything is done, and instead of adding the txt recipe, we need to add the scroll pane to our content pane. So once it's done, let's see the execution. So you see, we have a scroll bar right here. So if I do 1, 2, 3, you see it's going down, and now we can scroll upward as well. So let's do the same thing for the ingredients as well. So here I have my ingredients. I'm just going to simply copy this code and paste it right here and name this scroll to and txt ingredients, scroll to and scroll to. The bounds should be similar to this. So the bounds, and right there have. Now if we execute this, we have similar scroll bars for both ingredients and recipes. The next thing is, when my user clicks on this button, I need to check if my user has actually entered a certain title or not. Ingredient and recipe are not must. The user may or may not enter them. The user can update them later on, but the title is must. So this is what we are going to do now. Go to the design. So on save recipe, right click, add event handler, mouse clicked. So once we are inside the mouse click, so like I always do, I'm going to cut this code from here, go to the end of the code, put a comment here, event handler code. I'm going to paste the cutted code right here. So in here, I'm simply going to check for the title. So if txt title dot get text dot is empty, if the text of the title pane is empty, then I'm going to say j I'm going to show a message box which will let my user know that there is something, he's missing something. So joption pane dot show message dialog, this will be null, and the message will say enter title of the recipe, and this was the message, and the title of this message dialog will be title missing, and the type of the icon of the message dialog box will be option pane dot error message. It will be an error message, right? So but if the txt title text is empty, show user a error message. But else, if it's not empty, if it's good, then here we need to do we need to communicate or pass the data to controller or saving it into the DB, right? But for that, we need to work on the database part. So let's go ahead and first work on the databases. So in my model, I'm going to have a class DB connection. In this class, I will establish a connection with my databases. Let's close all others. So in this particular class, I'm going to establish a connection with my databases. With DB connection class, I'm going to have private connection, and it will be a java.sql connection, and similarly private statement, and it will be again java.sql type of statement, and I'm going to instantiate the object with the stack. Now I'm going to have an function public void init mysql jdbc, and inside of this I'm going to actually trying to instantiate my connection with my WAMP server. So let's see. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is class dot for name com dot mysql dot jdbc dot driver. So dot new instance. So what this line will do, it will actually create an instance for the jdbc driver for me to actually work on it. So let's see, it says whether to throw a declaration or surround with try catch. So let's say surround with try and multi catch. So what type of exception will occur? It will straightforward go to the catch and print a stack trace right here. So inside of this, I'm going to string connection URL is equal. So here I'm going to write my connection URL, and my connection URL is JDBC MySQL localhost 3306 and right here. And similarly, I'm going to have string connection user. And my connection user in my case is root, and string connection password, and in my case my password is empty. So in your case you will replace them with whatever your username and URL and password is. So now let's create a connection. So I'm going to say con is equals to driver manager dot get connection, and right here I have connection URL, connection user, and connection password. It's giving me an error, so let's see what it is. So I will say add exception to the existing catch clause. So it has added the exception and it is resolved. Now I need to write a function which will actually close the connection, because we need to close the connection. So I will say public void close the connection, and I will simply say con dot close, right? Again it will give me an error and I will have to surround it with try catch. So it's surrounded with the try catch. Next thing we need to do is there will be two types of queries that we will be executing now in today's lecture. One is the insert query for adding the recipe, and the second one is database creation queries, like database creation and then the table creation queries. So I will say public void execute. This execute will execute the simple database creation query. So I will pass a query in the form of a string this particular function, and then I will execute that particular query in order to uh, create whatever the table or the database is required in my wampserver DB. So let's see how to actually code. So the very first thing in this execute that I will be doing is I will be instantiating my MySQL JDBC connection. The very first thing that I need to do, and once my connection has been generated, so whatever this query is, I'm going to create a statement cmt is equals to con dot create shell. So I'm creating a statement from this particular query. So how? And I would say stmt dot execute this query, whatever this query is. So first I have created a statement from my connection, and then with the help of that statement I have executed this particular string query. Now of course it will ask me to enclose them inside these try catch. So I've enclosed them inside the try catch. First this, and the second one will resolve if I add it, but from here edit right here, right? So my both of these statements are enclosed in the try catch, and now I can execute any of my query easily. So let's first focus on the database creation, and then we will focus on the insert queries later on. So in my model I'm going to say I have a class. This class will be responsible for creating a database. So DB creation, of course this class will require a DB connection. So I'm going to say DB connection, DB is equals to new DB connection. So in this class I'm going to have a function public void create database. So in this particular function, let's say create database, I'm simply going to say I have a query string query for creating the database. I have all the queries right here, so let me copy them. So I have this create database if it does not exist query with the name of the recipe book, and I have the query, and I'm simply going to say db dot execute this particular query. So once this executes, it will create a database. Next I need to create a table. So no need of strings. I'm simply saying query is equals to this. I have a query for the table creation as well right here. So this query is generating a table that have a ID, which is the auto increment, title, category, ingredients, and recipe. So I have a query of it right here. Now I'm simply say db dot execute query. So after this particular function is actually generating my whole database. I will go to my main class and I'm simply going to say before calling the view, generate my database. So db creation, dbc is equals to new db creation, and with the help of this object I'm simply calling the create database function. Let's see if I execute this right now, will it create a database in my WAMP server or not. So I'm going to open the WAMP server first. So I have the WAMP server right here, and now I'm going to execute it. So this is my WAMP server. Let's refresh it, and I have my recipe book, and there is a recipe data table inside of it, and in this table there is right now no records, right? So that means with the help of this code my database has been created and a particular table has been generated as well. So this means my db creation class is working perfectly. So let's close this, and we do not need the main anymore. So before going further towards adding the recipe into database, let's first generate the business logic for that. So I'm going to the controller and adding a new class, and this class will be recipe. The data members, the class will be private string title, private string ingredients, private string category, private string recipe, right? So I have all of these. Now let's generate the constructors. So just like we did in the last lecture, we go to the source and we say generate constructor using fields, generate, and then we generate a default constructor, deselect and generate. So we have our constructor. Now setters and getters. So go to the source, generate setters and getters, select all and generate. So I have made all setters and getters. I'm going to put all of my logical functions right here. Logical function code right here. Okay, so right now my business class infrastructure is ready. I need to code the logical functions, but we will code them as we encounter them. So let's go to the model and have a model class for the recipe as well. Recipe. So what I'm going to do, because I've named my classes the same, so I'm going to just copy this whole code and paste it right here. So I have my model class of the recipe ready as well. So go to the main view. In the main view, we have our panel, and here we have our whole panel code. So in this our whole panel code, we had a button click in which we needed to communicate the data. So in order to communicate the data, we need to have a controller object right here. So I'm going to say private recipe, and this should be the controller recipe, not the model recipe. So controller recipe, and I'm going to name the object rcp new recipe. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is communicate the data. So I'm going to say rcp dot set title should to txt, title dot get text, and similarly rcp dot set recipe dot txt, recipe dot get text. Similarly rcp dot set category to tx, sorry, it was a combo box, cb category dot get selected item dot to string, because it was returning an object, so we need to convert the object to a string. rcp dot set, we are done with category, ingredients are left, so txt ingredients dot get text. So the data has been communicated. Now we just need to call a particular function. So I just need to say if rcp dot save data. So this function will be a boolean returning. So if this particular function that the save data of the controller returns me true, then I will do show success message and clear the phone. In this, the to do task is show a failure message, right? And this particular to do is already done. So here we have this, and we need to generate this particular save data function. So save data, and here it has generated a save data. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to pass on this but whole data to our model recipe class. And so for that we will have a private recipe from model, right? And rcp is equals to new recipe model, right? Now we just need to communicate the data, and it will be simple. rcp dot set category to this dot category, and similarly rcp dot set title to this dot title, rcp dot set ingredients to this dot ingredients, and rcp dot set recipe to this dot recipe. Now the data is done. Now we just need to call the rcp dot save data function, which will be actually be executing a query. So I have this save data and we need to create this function. So I will say create method save data in the recipe right here. It will of course returns me a true. So in here need to have a string query, and of course this particular query to be executed I need to have a database connection object. So here I will say db connection, db is equals to new db connection, because our logical functions are there. So I'm just going to cut and paste it right here. Okay, so I have a db object and I will have a query here, but we do not have a function for executing the insert query in our db connection. So let's go to db connection, and here I'm going to have a function public void execute insert. So this particular function will execute the insert queries, because insert and updates are both actually changing our database table. They are actually updating them. So I will say execute insert or I'm going to create a single function for them. So if you have an update query or if you have an insert query, you will simply pass that query into this function and this function will execute them. So what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to say the very we did in our previous. I'm going to instantiate my SQL JDBC connection. Then I'm going to have a statement SQL, and the next thing is I'm going to generate a statement con.create statement, and then I'm going to say from this statement dot execute, and you will have a update function right here, execute up, and in this I will pass the query. So once this is done, it will ask me to surround them with try catch. So I have surrounded them with the try catch. Control X the key from here and paste it inside the try, and it's done, right? So I will simply now the only thing that is remaining for us is go to our recipe and have a query, and then I will simply say db dot execute insert update query, and I will pass this query in here. I have the query of the insert right here. So I'm just going to copy this particular query and paste it here. So this particular query says insert into recipe book table recipe data. This is database name and this is table name. All of these ID title are actually the column names, and this is the values. This dot title, this dot category, ingredient, and recipe. So once this is done, and then db dot execute insert update. So model is executing the query and returning as true. Controller is calling the model function. So that is controller is calling the model function. So that is true. Now we go back to our view function right here. where we were actually calling it. Now we add a G option pane message, and we say right here G option pane, and I will say the message is recipe has been added successfully, right? And the title can be maybe data session successful, right? And now it's no longer an error message. Instead of it's an information message. I'm going to say information message. And in this, we need to have a failure message. So I will simply say recipe record uh, right, check connection and try again. And this will be data insertion failed, right? And it will be an error message. The second thing that we need to do is on this, we need to clear our form. So let's make it a new tool. Clear the form to okay. So let's first see the execution till here. So I'm going to make it small so we can actually see the execution alongside on the van. So here I have my van. So let me resize it. I have my recipe book right here, and inside my recipe book I have my recipe data table, which right now have no data. So let's execute it. So as soon as I execute it, it will give me this. So let's say it's recipe 1, and we do not bother the ingredient and recipe, and I say save recipe. It says recipe has been added successfully. Okay, uh, sorry, close and refresh it and go to the recipe data, and my recipe has been added, right? So the only thing that we need to do is we need to clear this particular form. So I'm going to create a function right after the constructor right here. Take void restore default values. Function will be simple. It will be simply saying txt title dot set text to empty string and cb combo box category dot set selected index to 0, txt ingredients dot set text to empty, and txt recipe dot set text to empty as well. And we'll be just calling this function right here. So restore default values right here. So now let's see the execution one last time. So if I execute it, so give it a title like recipe 3 maybe, and let's say it's Italian, and I have ingredients like 1 2 3 4 5 7 so on, and my recipe is something something, and I say save recipe. So it says recipe has been added successfully, data has been cleared, and let's refresh, go to the recipe data, and we have our recipe right here. So that means it works completely. So today we did a recipe book first function, that was the add recipe. We learned how to actually we connect our database with our application, and how we can actually communicate from view to controller and controller to model, and then take the responses and communicate them back to the original user. So hope this lecture has helped you to understand the very basics of the basic desktop application with the help of the databases. So good luck, do follow the tutorial, and the next time we will do the next operations of the recipe book, that is the search, edit, and deletion of the particular recipe. Have a good day everyone. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel. Allah Hafiz.